Commander Vex of the Galactic Dominion adjusted his ceremonial shoulder spikes and gazed at the blue-green marble spinning lazily below his flagship. Earth. Species designation, primitive bipedal mammals. Threat level, laughably insignificant. This was going to be the easiest conquest in his 40-year military career. Status report. Lieutenant Kraz, Vex commanded, his voice carrying the practiced authority of someone who'd conquered 17 worlds before lunch on Tuesday. Scans complete, sir. Population roughly 8 billion. Technology level barely past combustion engines. They still use something called the Internet to share pictures of small furry creatures. Kraz paused, his three eyes blinking in sequence. Sir, I'm detecting what appears to be a primitive nuclear arsenal. But honestly, it's so outdated it might as well be pointed sticks. Vex chuckled, a sound like gravel in a blender. Excellent. Deploy the standard intimidation protocol. Full atmospheric breach, maximum menacing hover, and prepare the surrender demand. I want to be back in time for the quarterly efficiency review. The Dominion fleet descended through Earth's atmosphere with all the subtlety of a freight train through a library. Ships the size of city blocks cast shadows over major population centers, while smaller vessels took strategic positions. It was textbook invasion theater, designed to inspire immediate capitulation through sheer overwhelming presence. Unfortunately, nobody had bothered to consult the textbook with humanity. Jake Martinez was having what could generously be called a day. His alarm hadn't gone off, his coffee maker had died sometime during the night, and the downtown construction project he was managing had just discovered what appeared to be either a gas line or possibly a very large, very angry mole tunnel. All he wanted was to grab a sandwich from Tony's Deli in maybe 5 minutes where nothing exploded, collapsed, or required him to fill out forms and triplicate. Instead, he found himself staring up at what could only be described as a flying metal cathedral hovering over downtown Phoenix. The thing was massive, all angular edges and ominous purple lighting, casting a shadow that turned noon into twilight. Well, Jake muttered, adjusting his hard hat, that's new. The ship's communications array crackled to life, broadcasting in perfectly translated English across every frequency on the planet. Primitive inhabitants of the third planet. I am Commander Vex of the Galactic Dominion. Your world is now under our jurisdiction. Surrender immediately and your deaths will be swift and efficient. Resistance is futile and frankly embarrassing for everyone involved. Jake looked around the suddenly empty street, then back up at the ship. A smaller vessel was descending toward the plaza, apparently intent on making this his problem specifically. Because of course it was. The ship touched down with surprising grace, and a ramp extended with the kind of dramatic flair that suggested these aliens had watched too many movies. Commander Vex emerged, flanked by 2 soldiers who looked like they'd been designed by someone who thought intimidating meant more spikes. Vex was an impressive figure, standing nearly 8 feet tall with silver-scaled skin and eyes like glowing amber. His uniform was a masterpiece of military intimidation, complete with medals that probably represented the conquered worlds of species who'd made the fatal mistake of not having a good dental plan. Human, Vex announced, his voice carrying across the plaza with electronic amplification, you will serve as this planet's representative in the surrender ceremony. It is an honor you do not deserve. Jake looked around again, confirming that yes. He was still the only person dumb enough to be standing in an empty plaza having a conversation with what appeared to be a very official space lizard. Listen, I'm just trying to get lunch here. Maybe you want to talk to someone from the government? I can give you directions to City Hall. Vex's amber eyes narrowed. Silence. Your species' tendency toward inappropriate levity in the face of superior force is noted and will be corrected through proper subjugation protocols. Look, I don't know what that means, but I'm pretty sure my union contract doesn't cover alien invasions. That's probably more of a federal thing. The alien commander's expression shifted to what might have been confusion if you squinted, and had a very liberal interpretation of facial expressions. This wasn't going according to the manual at all. Commander Vex had conquered 17 worlds, and every single one had followed the same predictable pattern. Show up, demand surrender, receive surrender, file paperwork, move on to the next target. It was so routine he could do it in his sleep, which he occasionally did during particularly boring subjugation ceremonies. Humans apparently hadn't read the manual. This is highly irregular, Vex muttered to Lieutenant Kraz through his communication implant. The primitive should have prostrated himself by now. Why is he still standing there making what I can only assume are inappropriate facial expressions? Jake Martinez, for his part, was trying to process a situation that his construction management training had definitely not prepared him for. The alien commander was clearly waiting for something, but Jake wasn't sure what. Maybe this was some kind of elaborate prank? Phoenix was weird enough that alien invasion pranks weren't entirely outside the realm of possibility. So Jake said, filling the increasingly awkward silence, "You guys want to take over the planet?" "That's a thing that's happening. Should I be doing something specific here? Or are we just going to stand around looking at each other until someone calls the cops?" X's confusion deepened. In his experience, primitive species either cowered in terror or launched futile attacks. They didn't make casual conversation about law enforcement procedures. "Human," Vex said slowly, "you will now perform the traditional gesture of submission. Raise your dominant appendage to signal your species' acceptance of Galactic Dominion authority." Jake blinked. "You want me to raise my hand? Correct?" This is a universal sign of surrender recognized throughout the galaxy. What Vex failed to mention, mostly because he'd never bothered to read the fine print in the Galactic Conquest manual, was that the gesture involved raising one's hand palm forward in a specific ritual pattern while maintaining a submissive posture. It was a complex bit of ceremonial theater that took most species several attempts to get right. What Jake heard was "raise your hand," which in human culture meant either "I have a question" or "high five time." Given the surreal circumstances, his brain defaulted to the more cheerful interpretation. "Oh, sure thing, buddy," Jake said, his face breaking into the kind of smile that generally preceded either great friendships or spectacular disasters. He raised his right hand enthusiastically and stepped forward. Vex began to raise his own hand in the traditional gesture of acceptance, pleased that this was finally proceeding according to protocol. The raised hand would be followed by the ritual touching of palms, then the formal surrender speech, then paperwork. Lots and lots of paperwork. What happened next would later be described by witnesses as the moment everything went sideways, assuming there were any witnesses, which there weren't, because everyone with functioning survival instincts had fled the area the moment giant alien spaceships showed up. Jake, operating under the assumption that this was the galaxy's most elaborate high five, approached with the enthusiasm of someone who'd never met a social interaction he couldn't make awkward. He wound up like he was trying to high five a particularly tall friend, adding a little hop for extra reach. Vex, meanwhile, was raising his hand in the slow, ceremonial manner prescribed by Dominion protocol, but completely unprepared for what could only be described as an incoming human missile. The collision was spectacular. Jake's enthusiastic high-five attempt connected with Vex's ceremonial gesture, at roughly the speed of someone who'd spent 15 years in construction and had the arm strength to prove it. The sound was like a sledgehammer hitting a watermelon, if watermelons were made of alien bone and cartilage. Vex went down like a sack of angry space potatoes, his amber eyes crossing as he hit the plaza's concrete with a sound that would later be described by traumatized witnesses as crunchy. Lieutenant Kraz and the other soldiers stood frozen, trying to process the fact that their commanding officer had just been laid out by what appeared to be an overly friendly, primitive wielding the galaxy's most devastating high five. "Oh crap," Jake said, staring down at the unconscious alien commander. "I think I broke your boss." Lieutenant Kraz's three eyes blinked in sequence, a sure sign of deep cognitive distress. "You struck Commander Vex during a surrender ceremony. That's not in the manual anywhere." "Surrender ceremony? I thought we were doing introductions. You know, like a handshake thing, but vertical." Jake looked genuinely concerned. "Is he going to be okay?" "I've got a pretty solid first aid certification." The other soldier, Sergeant Blitz, was frantically consulting his tactical display. "Sir, the human appears to have rendered the commander unconscious through application of what our sensors are registering as aggressive friendliness. I don't have a protocol for this." "Neither do I," Kraz admitted. "This is unprecedented. Should we arrest him? Retreat? File an incident report?" Jake knelt down beside Vex, who was making small groaning noises that sounded like a deflating balloon with anger management issues. Listen, guys, I'm really sorry about this. Your friend here seems like he's probably fine. Just had his bell rung a little. Maybe we should get him some water? Or whatever you guys drink. Probably not water, huh? And that's how first contact between humanity and the Galactic Dominion turned into the galaxy's most awkward medical emergency. With a construction worker trying to administer first aid to an alien commander while two bewildered soldiers debated whether this constituted an act of war or a very unfortunate cultural misunderstanding. Spoiler alert, it was both. News of the Phoenix incident spread across both Earth and the Galactic Dominion network at approximately the speed of light, which is to say, fast enough to cause maximum chaos in minimum time. On Earth, social media exploded with shaky cell phone footage of Jake Martinez accidentally cold-cocking an alien commander. The hashtag Alien High Five was trending within minutes. In space, the Dominion's emergency protocols kicked in with the efficiency of a bureaucracy that had never encountered a situation quite this ridiculous before. Let me understand this correctly, Admiral Zorth said, his four eyes scanning the incident report with increasing disbelief. Commander Vex was rendered unconscious by a human who was attempting to greet him? That's correct, sir, Lieutenant Kraz replied through the communication link, his voice carrying the unique strain of someone trying to explain the inexplicable. The human showed no signs of hostility. In fact, he appeared genuinely concerned about the commander's welfare and offered to provide medical assistance. And you left him there? With the human? Sir, the human insisted on calling what he termed proper medical authorities. He seemed to know what he was doing, and frankly, our medical training doesn't cover concussions caused by enthusiastic greeting rituals. Admiral Zorth rubbed his temples, a gesture that looked particularly complex given his anatomy. This is a disaster. Do you have any idea what this looks like? A Dominion commander taken down by a primitive who was trying to be friendly? Meanwhile, back on Earth, the situation was developing with the kind of chaotic enthusiasm that only humans could bring to an alien invasion. Dr. Lisa Park, xenobiologist and owner of the most unfortunately timed sabbatical in academic history, had been enjoying a quiet morning of research when her phone exploded with calls from colleagues, government agencies, and at least 3 different news networks. Dr. Park, the voice on the phone belonged to General Murphy, a man whose reputation for handling impossible situations was matched only by his talent for making them worse. We need you in Phoenix. Now. General, I'm a xenobiologist. I study theoretical alien life forms. This is a bit outside my expertise area. Doctor, we have actual aliens sitting in a downtown plaza, and one of them is being treated for a head injury by a construction worker who keeps apologizing and offering everyone sandwiches. I'd say we're well past theoretical at this point. Lisa grabbed her emergency field kit, which she'd packed as a joke but was now looking like the most prescient decision of her career. I'll be there in 3 hours. Make it 2. The scene in downtown Phoenix had evolved into something that could only be described as organized chaos. Jake Martinez had somehow become the unofficial human ambassador, mostly because he was the only person present who wasn't either running away screaming or trying to take selfies with the aliens. Commander Vex had regained consciousness and was sitting on a bench, looking like someone who'd just had his worldview forcibly recalibrated. So Jake was saying, offering Vex a bottle of water, "You guys do this a lot? The whole invasion thing?" Vex accepted the water with the careful movements of someone who'd just learned that humans were capable of accidentally causing grievous bodily harm through the simple act of being friendly. It is, typically, less complicated. Yeah, I bet. Must be a tough job. All that traveling, dealing with different species. Probably lots of paperwork. Enormous amounts of paperwork, Vex admitted. Lieutenant Kraz was maintaining a perimeter, which mostly involved standing around looking official, while increasingly large crowds of humans gathered at a safe distance. The humans weren't behaving like any species in the Dominion database. Instead of cowering or attacking, they were taking pictures, sharing food, and engaging in what appeared to be enthusiastic speculation about alien technology. "Sir," Sergeant Blitz reported, "we're receiving multiple communications from the Dominion fleet. Admiral Zorth is demanding a full status report, and High Command is asking if we need medical evacuation." "Tell them the situation is fluid," Vex said carefully, "and that I'm receiving adequate medical attention from a qualified primitive." "I'm not actually medically qualified," Jake pointed out helpfully. I just know basic first aid and how to fill out incident reports. Speaking of which, are you guys going to need workman's comp for this? Because I'm pretty sure my insurance doesn't cover accidental alien assault. Dr. Lisa Park arrived to find a scene that would have been impossible to explain to anyone who hadn't witnessed it firsthand. The alien commander was sitting peacefully on a bench, engaged in what appeared to be casual conversation with a construction worker, while two alien soldiers stood nearby looking like they were questioning every life choice that had led them to this moment. This is not what I expected, Lisa muttered, approaching the group with the cautious optimism of a scientist who'd just discovered that her wildest theories were not only correct but also significantly weirder than anticipated. You must be the expert they sent, Jake said, looking relieved. Great, because I'm running out of small talk, and I think these guys are getting bored. Dr. Lisa Park, Xenobiology, she introduced herself to the group. And you are? Commander Vex of the Galactic Dominion, Vex replied, then added with what might have been embarrassment, currently on medical leave due to a cultural misunderstanding. General Murphy's arrival was announced by the sound of military helicopters and the kind of organized commotion that suggested someone had finally decided to treat this situation with the seriousness it probably deserved. Unfortunately, General Murphy's approach to serious situations involved a lot of weapons and very little patience. Dr. Park, the general said, striding across the plaza with the confident purpose of someone who'd seen enough action movies to know how these things were supposed to go. What's the tactical situation? Well, Lisa said, glancing at the peaceful scene before them, I'd say it's surprisingly friendly. Almost aggressively friendly, you might say. And that's when the second wave of Dominion ships appeared in the sky, because apparently, nobody had thought to mention that accidentally knocking out an alien commander might be interpreted as an act of war. Okay, Jake said, looking up at the new arrivals, this is probably bad, right? Probably, Vex agreed, then added with what sounded like genuine regret. I should mention that those are combat vessels, and they're likely operating under the assumption that I've been captured or killed. General Murphy's hand moved to his radio. All units, prepare for possible hostile contact. Wait, Lisa said, her scientific mind racing through the implications. Before we start shooting at each other, can we maybe try talking first? You know, like civilized beings? Talking is what got us into this mess, Jake pointed out. No, Lisa said, watching as the new alien ships began to descend. Not talking enough is what got us into this mess. What followed could only be described as the galaxy's most reluctant battle, fought by two sides who were increasingly convinced that they were dealing with complete lunatics. The second wave of Dominion ships, led by Admiral Zorth himself, arrived with all the tactical precision of a military force that had never encountered a species quite like humans. Their plan was simple: secure the landing zone, extract Commander Vex, and if the humans showed any signs of their apparently devastating greeting rituals, they'd respond with overwhelming force. The humans, for their part, had managed to turn the alien invasion into something resembling a very large, very dangerous block party. Word had spread through social media, and Phoenix's downtown was now filled with people who had apparently decided that first contact with alien life was something you didn't want to miss, regardless of the potential for death and/or dismemberment. This is all wrong, Admiral Zorth muttered, staring at his tactical display. Where are the military formations? The defensive positions? Why do I keep detecting what appears to be barbecue smoke? Sir, his tactical officer reported, scans indicate the humans have set up what they're calling food trucks around the perimeter. They appear to be selling refreshments to the gathering crowd. Zorth's four eyes blinked in sequence, a sure sign of impending migraine. They're having a festival? Down in the plaza, the situation was developing with the kind of chaotic energy that only humans could bring to a potential interplanetary incident. General Murphy had established a command post, Dr. Park was frantically trying to establish some kind of communication protocol, and Jake Martinez was still apologizing to everyone in sight while simultaneously becoming the most unlikely diplomatic figure in human history. Commander Vex, Jake said, I don't suppose you could call your friends up there and let them know this is all just a big misunderstanding? Vex was staring at the crowd with the expression of someone trying to process information that simply didn't fit into any existing category. Your species appears to be treating a potentially hostile alien invasion as a Recreational opportunity? Well, when you put it like that, it sounds weird, Jake admitted. But look, when's the next time we're going to get to meet actual aliens? This is history in the making here. History that might involve a lot of shooting, General Murphy pointed out, watching his tactical displays with growing concern. Those ships up there aren't exactly subtle about their weapon systems. Dr. Park was dividing her attention between her xenobiology equipment and what appeared to be a growing crowd of academics who had somehow materialized from nearby universities. This is fascinating, she said. Look at the cultural exchange happening here. Spontaneous interspecies contact with minimal government intervention. Minimal government intervention? General Murphy looked around at the military vehicles that were discreetly positioned around the plaza. What do you call this? Crowd control, Lisa replied. Different thing entirely. That's when Admiral Zorth decided to implement what the Dominion manual referred to as escalated intimidation protocol, which involved dramatic flyovers, weapon displays, and increasingly aggressive communication broadcasts. Unfortunately, humans had their own response to this kind of behavior, which could best be described as hold my beer and watch this. The first sign that things were about to go sideways came when someone in the crowd started playing music through a portable speaker system. Not just any music, but the kind of driving, energetic music that humans instinctively associated with action sequences. The crowd began to move with it, and what had been a peaceful gathering started to look like the world's most dangerous dance party. Sir, Lieutenant Kraz reported to Vex, the humans appear to be celebrating? Their biorhythms are elevated, but not in a way consistent with fear or aggression. They're having fun, Vex said slowly. They're actually enjoying this. Admiral Zorth's response was to deploy ground forces, which seemed like a reasonable tactical decision right up until the moment his soldiers encountered their first group of enthusiastic humans. The Dominion had protocols for hostile resistance, peaceful surrender, and everything in between. They did not have protocols for humans who wanted to shake hands, take pictures, and ask detailed questions about alien technology. All back to secondary positions came the order over the Dominion communication channels. The humans they're being aggressively friendly again. How do you fall back from aggressive friendliness? Sergeant Blitz asked, genuinely confused. Very carefully, his squad leader replied. The battle, such as it was, consisted mainly of Dominion forces trying to maintain military discipline while being steadily overwhelmed by human curiosity and hospitality. Every time they established a perimeter, humans would approach with offers of food, drinks, and friendly conversation. Every time they tried to advance, they found themselves surrounded by people who wanted to know about their home planets, their families, and whether they wanted to try some really excellent local barbecue. This is unprecedented, Admiral Zorth reported to High Command. The humans aren't fighting back, but they're not surrendering either. They appear to be attempting to befriend our entire invasion force. Is it working? Came the reply. Zorth looked at his tactical display, which showed Dominion soldiers scattered across the downtown area, most of them surrounded by small groups of chatting humans. Several were apparently engaged in what could only be described as cultural exchange activities. Disturbingly, yes. General Murphy was having his own crisis of military doctrine. This is not how invasions are supposed to work, he muttered. Watching his own forces struggle to maintain readiness in the face of what appeared to be an outbreak of interspecies friendship. Maybe that's the point, Dr. Park suggested. Maybe invasions don't have to work the way they always have. That's a very optimistic view of interplanetary warfare, Murphy replied. Is it warfare if nobody's actually fighting? Jake Martinez, meanwhile, had somehow become the unofficial coordinator of human-alien relations, mostly because he was the only person present who seemed to treat the entire situation as just another day at the office. Okay, he announced to the mixed crowd. I'm thinking we should probably figure out what everybody actually wants here before this gets more complicated. What we want, Admiral Zorth's voice boomed across the plaza, is the surrender of this planet and the immediate cessation of your aggressive hospitality. Aggressive hospitality? Jake looked genuinely puzzled. That's not a thing. We're just being friendly. Your friendliness rendered our commanding officer unconscious. That was an accident. I was trying to give him a high five. And that's when Dr. Park had what would later be described as either a moment of brilliant insight or a complete mental breakdown, depending on who you asked. "Wait," she said, her voice cutting through the chaos. "I think I know what's happening here." Dr. Lisa Park stood in the center of the plaza, surrounded by humans, aliens, military personnel, and what appeared to be at least 3 different news crews that had somehow materialized from the chaos. Her moment of revelation was the kind that made her wish she'd paid more attention during her public speaking classes. "Everyone listen to me," she called out, her voice carrying the authority of someone who'd just figured out the puzzle everyone else was struggling with. "This whole thing is a setup." The plaza fell silent, except for the distant sound of someone's portable radio playing what sounded like elevator music, which was definitely not helping the dramatic tension. "What do you mean, a setup?" General Murphy asked, his hand moving instinctively toward his weapon. "Think about it," Lisa said, her scientific mind racing through the implications. "The Dominion shows up with a standard invasion protocol that's apparently worked on 17 different planets. But humans don't respond the way they expect, so instead of adapting their approach, they double down and send more ships. Meanwhile, we respond to their escalation by having a barbecue." "Your point?" Admiral Zorth's voice crackled through the communication system. "My point is that neither side is actually trying to fight. You guys are following a script that doesn't work here, and we're treating this like a cultural exchange program. But somebody wanted this to turn into a shooting war." Commander Vex, who had been quietly observing the proceedings while nursing what was probably the galaxy's most embarrassing headache, suddenly straightened. "Dr. Park is correct. Admiral, check your invasion orders. Specifically, the authorization codes. The codes are standard Dominion High Command authorization. Level 7, direct from the Central Authority." "Admiral," Vex said slowly, "I've been a field commander for 20 years. Level 7 authorizations are only issued for species that pose a direct threat to Dominion security. These humans couldn't threaten a competently run sandwich shop, let alone the entire Galactic Dominion." Jake Martinez raised his hand. Excuse me, but did you just insult our sandwich shops?" "Because I'll have you know Tony's Deli makes an excellent pastrami on rye." "Not the point, Jake," Lisa said quickly. "Vex, what are you thinking?" "I'm thinking," Vex said, his amber eyes narrowing, "that someone in high command wanted this to go badly. The question is why." Admiral Zorth's voice cut through the plaza with the kind of tension that suggested he was reaching the same conclusion. "Commander, I'm reviewing the tactical briefings. You're right. The threat assessment for this system doesn't match the authorization level. We've been sent to conquer a species that, according to our own intelligence, spends most of its time arguing about sports and making videos of small animals." "Hey," someone in the crowd called out, "our sports arguments are very sophisticated." "Still not the point," Lisa said. "The question is, who benefits from Earth and the Dominion going to war?" That's when the Third Fleet arrived. The ships that descended from orbit were different from the Dominion vessels. Sleeker, more aggressive, and painted in what could only be described as ominous black with red highlights. They moved with the kind of coordinated precision that suggested their crews had been planning this moment for a very long time. "Well," Jake said, staring up at the new arrivals, "I'm guessing those aren't more friends." Admiral Zorth's tactical display lit up with threat indicators. "Unknown vessels. Identify yourselves immediately." The response came in the form of energy weapons fire, which had the immediate effect of unifying everyone in the plaza around the shared goal of not being vaporized. "Take cover," General Murphy shouted, as humans and Dominion forces suddenly found themselves on the same side of what was rapidly becoming a very real battle. "X," Lisa called out as they dove behind what had moments before been a peaceful food truck. "Please tell me you know who these people are." "The hegemony," Vex replied grimly. "The Dominion's primary rival for galactic influence. They've been looking for an excuse to start a war that would weaken both Earth and the Dominion. So they manipulated your high command into launching a fake invasion? And they manipulated us into responding aggressively enough to justify their intervention," General Murphy added, his military training finally kicking in now that he had a clear enemy to fight. Classic false flag operation. Jake peered over the edge of their improvised cover as energy bolts sizzled overhead. "Okay, so how do we get out of this?" "We work together," Vex said, checking his sidearm. Humans and Dominion forces, combined against a common enemy. I can't believe I'm saying this. Admiral Zorth's voice crackled through the communication system, but I'm authorizing joint tactical operations with human forces. Try not to accidentally assault any more of my officers. That was one time. Jake protested. The battle that followed was unlike anything in the Galactic Dominion's military history, though mostly because it involved humans doing things that no sane tactical manual would ever recommend. While Dominion forces provided heavy weapons support and coordinated fire, humans did what humans do best. They improvised, adapted, and turned everyday objects into surprisingly effective weapons. The food trucks became mobile weapons platforms. Construction equipment was repurposed into assault vehicles. Someone had apparently decided that the best way to fight advanced alien technology was with a combination of human ingenuity and complete disregard for personal safety. This is insane, Lieutenant Kraz reported, watching a group of humans use a crane to drop a dumpster on a hegemony fighter. It's working, but it's completely insane. Welcome to humanity, Dr. Park replied, coordinating between human and Dominion forces with the kind of calm efficiency that suggested she'd found her true calling as an interspecies military advisor. We specialize in insane things that work. The turning point came when Jake Martinez, who had somehow ended up coordinating ground operations despite having no military training whatsoever, suggested what he called the most stupid plan in the history of stupid plans. We're going to charge their command ship, he announced to the mixed human-alien force that had gathered around the makeshift command post. That's suicide, Sergeant Blitz pointed out. Probably, Jake agreed. But they're not expecting it, and sometimes the best plan is the one that's so stupid nobody sees it coming. I like it, Vex said, which surprised everyone, including himself. Really? General Murphy asked. Really. It's exactly the kind of unconventional thinking that this situation requires. And that's how the most unlikely alliance in galactic history prepared to launch the most ridiculous assault in military annals, all because a construction worker and an alien commander had learned to appreciate each other's unique approach to problem solving. The assault on the Hegemony command ship would later be studied in military academies across the galaxy as either a masterpiece of unconventional warfare or a textbook example of how sheer stupidity can sometimes triumph over superior technology. Historians are still debating which interpretation is correct. The plan, such as it was, involved a coordinated attack that combined Dominion military precision with human creativity in what could generously be called adaptive engineering. Jake Martinez had somehow convinced everyone that the best way to reach the heavily shielded command ship was to use construction equipment to build a makeshift launch platform, then literally catapult a mixed assault team into the enemy vessel. This is the worst plan I've ever heard, Admiral Zorth said over the communication link. It's also the only plan we've got, General Murphy replied, watching the improvised catapult take shape with the kind of fascination normally reserved for train wrecks. I can't believe I'm saying this, but it might actually work, Dr. Park added, running calculations on her tablet. The hegemony shields are designed to stop energy weapons and conventional projectiles. They're not designed to stop a construction crane launching a shipping container full of very determined people. Commander Vex, who had volunteered to lead the assault team, despite his recent head injury, was beginning to understand why humans had developed such a reputation for chaos. Your species approaches warfare like a recreational activity. Only when we're having fun, Jake replied, making final adjustments to the launch mechanism. And honestly, this is way more interesting than my usual Tuesday. The launch itself was spectacular in the way that only profoundly dangerous improvised engineering can be. The shipping container, loaded with human and Dominion soldiers, sailed through the air with all the aerodynamic grace of a flying brick, impacted the Hegemony command ship's hull, and proceeded to cut its way inside using a combination of alien energy weapons and human power tools. What followed was the galaxy's most chaotic boarding action, fought in the corridors of a ship whose crew had never encountered enemies who treated mortal combat like an extreme sport. The humans charged through the ship with the kind of enthusiastic aggression that made the Dominion soldiers look positively restrained by comparison. They're actually enjoying this, Lieutenant Kraz observed, watching Jake Martinez lead a charge against a heavily fortified position while whooping with what appeared to be genuine excitement. It's disturbing, Vex agreed, but undeniably effective. The hegemony commander, General Krex, found himself facing an enemy unlike anything in his considerable military experience. His forces were trained to fight disciplined armies, not what appeared to be an organized mob of gleefully violent humans backed by increasingly enthusiastic alien allies. Surrender now, Jake announced, having somehow made it to the command bridge despite several attempts to stop him. And we'll promise not to do anything too creative with your life support systems. You're bluffing, Krex replied, though his tone suggested he wasn't entirely confident about that assessment. Am I? Jake asked. Then proceeded to demonstrate his point by using a power drill to modify the bridge's main display panel in ways that definitely weren't covered by the manufacturer's warranty. The hegemony surrender came with surprising speed, mostly because their forces had been trained to fight wars and not participate in what appeared to be the galaxy's most dangerous improvisation exercise. General Krex himself seemed almost relieved when Commander Vex accepted his formal surrender with the kind of professional courtesy that suggested this was just another day at the actual office. So, Jake said as the dust settled, does this mean we're friends now? I think, Admiral Zorth said, materializing on the bridge via hologram, this means we're something entirely new. The aftermath of what would become known as the Phoenix incident was complicated by the fact that nobody was quite sure how to classify what had happened. It wasn't exactly a war, since most of the participants had spent more time talking than fighting. It wasn't exactly a peaceful first contact, since it had involved multiple instances of accidental assault and at least one major space battle. It was, in the words of the official report, a unique interspecies interaction that defied conventional categorization. The Galactic Dominion's response was typically bureaucratic. They formed a committee to study the situation, filed approximately 17 different incident reports, and scheduled a series of meetings to determine the proper protocol for future encounters with humans. The hegemony, meanwhile, found themselves in the unprecedented position of having to explain to their leadership how they had been defeated by what their own after-action reports described as creative incompetence backed by industrial equipment. We need new training protocols, General Krex admitted during his debriefing. Our forces are completely unprepared to deal with opponents who approach military strategy like a hobby project. What do you recommend? His superior asked. Honestly, I recommend we avoid fighting humans entirely. It's bad for morale. The most surprising development came when the three species realized that, despite the chaos and confusion, they actually worked rather well together. The humans brought creativity and adaptability, the Dominion provided discipline and resources, and the hegemony, once they stopped trying to shoot everyone, offered technological expertise and strategic thinking. It's like we complement each other's weaknesses, Dr. Park observed during one of the many post-incident meetings. Humans are creative but disorganized, the Dominion is disciplined but rigid, and the hegemony is strategic but inflexible. Together we're either unstoppable or completely insane, Jake added. Possibly both. 6 months later, the Phoenix station had been transformed from a backwater mining outpost into the hub of what was tentatively being called the Tri-Species Initiative. The official mission statement described it as a joint venture for mutual benefit and galactic stability. But everyone involved understood it was really an attempt to channel human chaos in productive directions while preventing another accidental war. Jake Martinez found himself with the rather improbable title of Director of Unconventional Solutions, which was apparently the Dominion's diplomatic way of saying the human we call when things get weird. His first official project involved designing a new class of construction vessel that could double as an emergency rescue ship and, if absolutely necessary, an improvised weapons platform. You realize this is completely insane, Commander Vex said, reviewing the blueprints. That's the point, Jake replied. If it was sensible, everyone would have thought of it already. Dr. Park had been appointed as the station's chief of research, where she was working on projects that combined human ingenuity with alien technology in ways that made the galaxy's top scientists either very excited or very nervous, depending on their perspective. Her current experiment involved using hegemony energy manipulation techniques to improve human coffee production, which she insisted was a legitimate scientific endeavor. Coffee is humanity's greatest contribution to galactic civilization, she explained to anyone who questioned her priorities. This is important work. The transformation wasn't without its challenges. Cultural differences that had seemed amusing during the crisis became genuine obstacles when people tried to work together on a daily basis. Humans insisted on personalizing their workspaces with what other species considered alarming amounts of random objects. The Dominion's rigid scheduling conflicted with human tendencies to work in unpredictable bursts of creativity. The hegemony's precise protocols were constantly disrupted by both human improvisation and Dominion inflexibility. But somehow it worked. Projects that should have taken years were completed in months through a combination of human inspiration, Dominion organization, and hegemony expertise. The station became a showcase for what was possible when three radically different species decided to focus on their strengths rather than their differences. I think Admiral Zorth said during one of his visits to the station, "We may have accidentally created something remarkable." "Accidentally?" Jake asked, gesturing toward the bustling hub of activity that surrounded them. "Admiral, accidental is what we do best." The Phoenix incident had ended not with victory or defeat, but with something unprecedented in galactic history, a genuine partnership between species that had nothing in common except their willingness to try something new. It was messy, chaotic, and completely unpredictable. In other words, it was perfectly human. And for the first time in centuries, the galaxy was a more interesting place. "I can't believe I'm saying this, but it might actually work," Dr. Park added, running calculations on her tablet. The hegemony shields are designed to stop energy weapons and conventional projectiles. They're not designed to stop a construction crane launching a shipping container full of very determined people. Commander Vex, who had volunteered to lead the assault team despite his recent head injury, was beginning to understand why humans had developed such a reputation for chaos. "Your species approaches warfare like a recreational activity." "Only when we're having fun," Jake replied, making final adjustments to the launch mechanism. "And honestly, this is way more interesting than my usual Tuesday." The launch itself was spectacular in the way that only profoundly dangerous improvised engineering can be. The shipping container, loaded with human and Dominion soldiers, sailed through the air with all the aerodynamic grace of a flying brick, impacted the Hegemony Command ship's hull, and proceeded to cut its way inside using a combination of alien energy weapons and human power tools. What followed was the galaxy's most chaotic boarding action. They fought in the corridors of a ship whose crew had never encountered enemies, who treated mortal combat like an extreme sport. The humans charged through the ship with the kind of enthusiastic aggression that made the Dominion soldiers look positively restrained by comparison. "They're actually enjoying this," Lieutenant Kraz observed, watching Jake Martinez lead a charge against a heavily fortified position while whooping with what appeared to be genuine excitement. "It's disturbing," Vex agreed, "but undeniably effective." The Hegemony commander, General Krex, found himself facing an enemy unlike anything in his considerable military experience. His forces were trained to fight disciplined armies, not what appeared to be an organized mob of gleefully violent humans backed by increasingly enthusiastic alien allies. "Surrender now," Jake announced, having somehow made it to the command bridge despite several attempts to stop him, "and we'll promise not to do anything too creative with your life support systems." "You're bluffing," Krex replied, though his tone suggested he wasn't entirely confident about that assessment. "Am I?" Jake asked. "I," then proceeded to demonstrate his point by using a power drill to modify the bridge's main display panel in ways that definitely weren't covered by the manufacturer's warranty. The Hegemony surrender came with surprising speed, mostly because their forces had been trained to fight wars, but not participate in what appeared to be the galaxy's most dangerous improvisation exercise. General Krex himself seemed almost relieved when Commander Vex accepted his formal surrender with the kind of professional courtesy that suggested this was just another day at the office. "So," Jake said as the dust settled, "does this mean we're friends now?" "I think," Admiral Zorth said, materializing on the bridge via hologram, "this means we're something entirely new." The aftermath of what would become known as the Phoenix incident was complicated by the fact that nobody was quite sure how to classify what had happened. It wasn't exactly a war, since most of the participants had spent more time talking than fighting. It wasn't exactly a peaceful first contact, since it had involved multiple instances of accidental assault and at least one major space battle. It was, In the words of the official report, a unique interspecies interaction that defied conventional categorization. The Galactic Dominion's response was typically bureaucratic. They formed a committee to study the situation, filed approximately 17